So Tana French, what is going on, y'all? How you doing? I just finished the likeness, and it was lit. I need a break from her because her stuff's really heavy, and this next one I know is really, really heavy after it. But in this book, you get an introduction to my favorite character that Tana French has ever written that I know of, and it's Frank Mackey? I want to say that's his name. Frank is, he cracks me up. He reminds me a little bit of, what's Angelina Jolie's ex name? Jennifer Aniston's ex too? He's everybody's ex. Brad Pitt. He reminds me of Brad Pitt from Snatch. You know that movie where he's like, you know, do you hear me? And he like talks like that so that nobody can understand the deal that he's making or whatever. Anyway, that's Mackie. I've been calling him Mackie. I know that's not his name, but anyway. So the likeness opens up with about 6 months after In the Woods ended. And it's from the perspective of Cassie. And Cassie is dating Sam, and their relationship's going good. They haven't moved in together or nothing, but she just loves him. She's still kind of reeling from her relationship with Rob. She's moved over to the domestic violence department, and it isn't until later that when you see how Sam describes her to herself that you realize like she hasn't really taken the time that she needs to heal from it. She's just been moving along, and like she hasn't been laughing or giddy or anything like she was in the last book. She's not bouncy. So one day Sam starts calling her a bunch of times, and she's like, the heck are you freaking out about? And she answers, and he's like, oh, thank God, okay, I need you over here at such and such. So she pops in, and it's a murder, and she's like, and Frank is there, and Sam is like, y'all know each other? Because Frank is like, Cassie, my love. And he is this like, he's so larger than life. I love him so much, especially in the later books. He's in the next book, and I think the next book's in his perspective, like from his perspective, and then the one after that, he's in it or something. I can't remember for sure. And in his character, I love how his character is described. He was mentioned a little bit in the first book, I want to say, but anyway, he's such an a-hole. I love him. So they go into this house where this murder victim is, and she's like, you know, I don't understand what the big deal is. And the murder victim looks just like her. It's her. And it's not a house. They're in this, like, a shed out in the middle of nowhere almost. Or like, you know, in an alleyway. And the murder victim is stabbed in the stomach, I think. And there's no blood around her. So it's like she was dragged there. And there's no footprints or anything. There's like little to no evidence. And they have her wallet and stuff on her lap. But it doesn't have any blood on it. And it doesn't have any fingerprints or anything. And the only interesting thing, I mean, besides the fact that she's a murder victim, is that it looks just like, what's-her-face, Cassie. So, of course, Sam had a whole panic attack, and everybody's looking Cassie like she crazy because she looks exactly like the victim, like it's her doppelganger, which kind of makes me think of changelings. Anyway, so, let me fix that. So, Frank's got a kooky idea. This girl, her name is Alex, they call her Lexi, has been, before her murder, she was going to college at the place that Cassie was going to college when Cassie was in undercover. Remember when she got stabbed? So Cassie was in undercover there, and she was going under the alias of Lexi, of Alex. This girl adopted her persona and took her personality or whatever. She took on her old life of what she was as a undercover, and she developed a friend group with these, it's a 5-people group, including Lexi. And Daniel, Abby, Justin, Rake, and Lexi. And they are really weird people. Like, they're really quiet, reserved. Nobody likes them. Nobody has accepted them in the college. Like, they're this, like, they've got, like, a hive mind. And because of that, the cops can't get anywhere with them. And they can't get any, like, straight answers out of them. And they're just like, we can't break into this group. And we're trying to solve this case and figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, Frank has a great idea of, like, he's like, hey, you've been trained in undercover, and this is like a golden opportunity. Nobody's ever going to get an opportunity like this again. This case is so rare and so unique, and we have to do this. And he wants it for love of the game. He's just into it. And Cassie's like, I hated undercover. It ruined my life. And undercover people don't tend to keep relationships long, and I kind of like mine. Sam's against it because he's like, every one of her friends is a murder suspect, in my opinion, and I don't want her going into there where somebody in that group might have been the killer, or walking around the school where somebody at the school might be the killer, or whatever. All of this stuff. And they do the autopsy on the girl, and her weight is almost exact. It's like down to the next 6 pounds or something. And just everything is so perfect. Her hair is the same. And Cassie is really kind of strung out by this. She's like, this is like, she felt like the girl called out to her, like the girl came to find her, kind of thing. Like, she felt like, shit, I gotta go. She felt a very surreal connection to the victim, besides just that she looked like her. And the more she starts to, like, she accepts that, yes, we're gonna do this. I'm gonna go undercover, because obviously it's a good story. So she's gonna go undercover, and the more she learns of, and it takes a lot of, like, swaying from Frank. He comes over and kind of, like, charms her, and she knows what he's doing, and it doesn't stop him from being able to manipulate her. He's an incredibly manipulative person, and he's really sharp. Like, he reads everything, and it's just freaking nutso. So they go through the training, which is really interesting, because like I said in the last book, like, it's not just, okay, this happened and then this happened and then this happened. It's like they go really in depth with the training of an undercover, and all of the, where does she typically sit at the table, where does she sleep in the house, what is her class schedule, what is her relationship with the teachers, what is her philosophy on every independent, what's her music taste, what's everything about her that they can find from her social media or any, well, she doesn't have social media, but like videos from the other people in the house and from interviewing people in the house. They just formulate an entire personality out of secondhand information, and they make Cassie study it perfectly until she's just in the zone with the girl, until she's starting to adopt the personality of the girl, to the point where even when Frank's kind of arguing with her, and he's like, look, if you got any kind of cold feet, if you're in any doubt of being able to do this, don't do this, because I can't play these games with you. You're either in or you're out. And she's like trying to think about how, she's like, I know what he's doing. He's trying to convince me to do it without, and she's like, what would Lexi do? And she's like, okay, I'm gonna do what Lexi would do. So she like laughs in Frank's face and tells him to go buy her ice cream. And Frank's reaction is just like the funniest thing. He's like, what? He looks shocked and dismayed. It's hilarious. So she goes in the house, and she has a wire in her bra, and everyone's reaction to her being there is pretty universally supportive, except for Daniel. Did I say Daniel? Yeah, Daniel is the lead of the group, pretty much. And he kind of just looks at her, because he's the one that took the pulse of the corpse to ensure that she was dead. And they came up with a backstory of how she survived. They said that she was suffering hypothermia, which lowered her heart rate and caused severe memory loss, which would help her with trying to infiltrate into this group in case she accidentally makes a mistake. She can just claim that she doesn't remember something. So because of all of that, like, Daniel's kind of looking at her like, I know you're dead. And they're catching her a little bit with little things, but for the most part, they're just so overjoyed at the situation being resolved and her being alive that everybody pretty wholeheartedly accepts her. And Abby pulls her aside and is just kind of checking on her and stuff, and she's like, hey, what about your pregnancy? And that's something they had found out, that Lexi was pregnant, but they don't know who the dad is, and they don't know, and so she's just like, the baby didn't make it, and it's fine, I wasn't sure if I was going to keep it anyway. And Abby is like, okay. She's like, please be a good sister in this situation, don't tell nobody. And Abby is a good ally to a woman. She doesn't do anything about it. She's just like, okay, whatever you need, I'm here. Justin's the gay guy in the group, although there's somebody else that's kind of, I'll get into that later. But they have these one-on-ones where she has to be on guard, and it describes so perfectly the way a person feels when they're on guard like this, because her first day there, it only lasted a couple hours, and she was so emotionally drained from being so careful about everything for so long that she immediately went straight to bed and passed out. Like, she couldn't function. And that's something that they say in North Korea. Like, people that live in North Korea, their sleep schedules are like that. They sleep most of their time because being so afraid of accidentally saying the wrong thing that can be misconstrued as being non-patriotic, and now you get sent to their little version of the gulags. The people there, especially visitors, get this deep exhaustion and depression that causes them to sleep. And people that grew up in traumatic homes, they know this. Like, it's a joke for me when I was growing up. It was like, oh, we don't have any food, it's time to go to sleep. Anyway, so her next day, she stays home. She doesn't go to school. And everybody else goes, and she does this so that she can, continue with the whole I'm traumatized and I need some time to recover thing, but also I need to go through this house. I'm going to check this house. So she goes through and she starts getting a feel for the vibe of the house and the people while nobody's there. And she goes and rifles through everybody's stuff. And one of the things that they know is that Lexi used to have a diary, but nobody could find it. The cops searched the house. They couldn't find it. And none of the roommates seem to have been able to find it either. But Alex is able to find it almost Cassie is able to find it almost immediately, and it scares her because she's like, I don't feel like I've just done a really good job of pretending to be this girl. I feel like this girl is embracing me from beyond the grave and telling me how to do this. So, otherwise why would I be able to find a stranger's diary so quickly? It's not just because I studied. But, she finds her diary, and in the diary she's able to see, like, first of all, there's very little emotion in it. It's mostly just keeping a schedule of who she met and where and when. And she doesn't say the names. She says, like, N, met N at such and such a time, met N at such and such another time. And then she wrote, that's how she found out she was pregnant, or, like, how long the victim knew she was pregnant, because she marked the dates of her period, and there was like 3 months where it wasn't there. So she goes through Abby's room, Justin's room, Rake's room, and she gets to Daniel's room, and she stops, and she's like, there's a booby trap in here. Like, she just trusts her gut on it. She's like, I know that there's something in here that's going to show him that I went through his stuff, so I'm not going to check his room. But everybody else's room, she can't get any heads or tails of, like, who might have been involved. She couldn't find any diaries or journals or anything to find out who might have been the person to either know who killed her or killed her. Okay, it's time to talk about the house. So the house was inherited by Daniel from his family, and he's from a very substantial family in England. Like, they're English folk. Everybody else seems pretty Irish. I can't remember. But he is from, like, quote unquote good stock, and his brother is one of those people that's like, I need to put my name on the map, I need to, like, you know, acquire this house and sell it so that I can make a buttload of money or turn it into a hotel or something. But because Daniel's the one that inherited it, he saw this house for the glory that it was, as like a historical beauty, and he and the others just started spending time renovating it. And what he did when he acquired the house was, because this was his new friend group, that he's never had friends before, and they have such a really strong, almost ethereal bond, that he made it so that the house was joint owned by all of them. So each person has a share of the house. And I don't know, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but there's something witchy about the house, and it's another one of those, like, it was on the land of a fairy folk area, like the witch's tree or the fairy tree, and the house was built on it, near it, or from it, I can't remember. But there's a very, like, when Cassie enters the house, she feels like she came home. Like, that was her first reaction to it. It was like she never felt like she was at home most of her life, and this was her first feeling of coming home. And it was really strange that she felt that way about a bunch of people that are not in her life. She never knew them, and now they're family and all of that. They worship this house, and when I say worship, I mean like the way that you imagine like a Catholic person worships the Virgin Mary or Jesus, and they make a shrine of it and they pray to it. Like these people's way of praying to it is to spend time talking about how to fix it and what to do with it, and polishing it and sanding the floors and working on it. They spend little time outside of it. When they're not at school, they're at the house. And that was even something that the police were wondering. They're like, how come these guys aren't ever seen at the local pub? And it's mostly because their bond is so strong that they've alienated themselves from everybody around them. And it turns out that there is some serious contention between the townsfolk and this house. So the townsfolk were kind of throwing rocks in the window and trying to burn the house down, and coming in and stealing things. And they can't figure out why. It's very secretive. Nobody wants to talk about it, but eventually they find out that it's related to an old story, and this is what everybody found out, because like nobody would tell them, and this is the story that they were told, and it wasn't even the right story. But this is what they were told, was that back in the day when this house was like first constructed or something, there was a young woman who had a sexual relationship with the owner of this house, and she became pregnant, and he denied ownership or responsibility. And so the townspeople shamed her and were going to send her off to a nunnery, which was essentially a slave labor camp for women. And she hung herself and killed herself. And the townspeople were so angry about this that they just had an issue with the house ever since, and she was hung there. So like they kind of like, that was the theory that everybody was going on. They're trying to find people that might have had a reason to harm somebody in the house. Because what it seems to be is that the second the people moved in to the house, like the townspeople, their assaults on the property kind of seemed to stop, or at least slow down a lot. So it's a mess. Okay, so it's not that fun to talk about their conversations. It's fun to listen to their conversations and the way that they navigate the world. Daniel is a philosopher, and he's gotten to that weird part of philosophy where it's almost like do the worst thing that you can do to yourself, because it's for the beauty of doing so that you will find realism and you'll be authentic. You'll like authenticate yourself in your life. So like instead of participating in the real world or the rat race, you can be a pauper and have your own sense of justice and validation that way, and everybody else is fake. That's something cult leaders say. That's something that manipulative, abusive partners say. The whole thing is kind of a mess. So that's where they're at. Justin was, he came out as gay his first year in college when he came home for Christmas, and I don't need these anymore. And his family disowned him, and they were really mean to him, and he was heartbroken and shook. And he fully embraced this new family of people. Abby was the person that kind of created this group because she seems to have a very strong read on people. Like, she can see a lost soul and a person that'll fit from a mile away. And she's kind of the person that collected them all together. Because they met when Daniel is that posh kid that nobody likes because he's got almost like a humorless way of speaking to people and acting. Abby came from foster care, and so she ain't got no ties to her mom, who, you know, she was a sex worker and a drug addict and all of that stuff. So Abby's just like, I don't have any other ties, and I don't belong here in this Ivy League school. So I'm going to walk up to the most, you know, she's already full of anxiety and fear. She's like, I'm going to walk up to, like, the most posh, most abrasive person here, the one that scares me the most, and I'm just going to make him my friend. I'm just, screw it. That's who I'm going to talk to. And that was Daniel. And she didn't even invite him out afterwards. It was like during orientation, and like all she said was, okay, well, they're doing this meeting at such and such a time and place, I'll see you there. And he was like, okay, I've never had anyone be nice to me before because I'm a complete a-hole. Let's see where this one goes. And then they go there. It was some sort of library orientation or something, and in the back there's this kid that's just, he's sneezing and coughing. He's got a horrible cold, and every time he coughs or sneezes, everybody's kind of like not very nice to him, and he's just dying of shame, but he can't not be there. And toward the very end, or somewhere in the, toward the very end, she turns to the sneezing kid, and she's like, me and this guy Daniel are gonna go and get something to drink at such and such a place. You coming? And the kid just like, yeah, someone's nice to me. Oh my gosh, yes. And so they meet up, and, you know, 2 became 3. And it just continues along that way until it's all 5 people. Lexi was the last one to join, and she was like everybody's baby. Everyone was like the big brother or sister to chaotic Lexi, and her like stereotype or her personality was to have absolutely like seemingly no forethought in the things that she does, and no like future and no past. And that was one of the rules that Daniel made, because everybody seemed to be pretty traumatized. Rake was one of those kids that was bullied by his father, and his father constantly is calling him and chewing him out for not participating in the family trade, and like, you know, just being a desk jockey and doing very little of substantial value, like why even go to college. So everybody's got a pretty miserable home life, and they're all kind of like at that age in college where you're kind of lost and you don't really know what's real and what isn't. You know that your parents believe what they say, but you also have a sense that you may have been misled and lied to, because when you go to college, you face all the other worldviews that exist. And it's almost like going into a culture shock, because you realize that none of us are normal, which means I'm not normal, which means I get to define normal. I get to decide what my future is. I get to decide what being adult means. And I get to decide what my friend group is going to be like. And this is where you start to realize who you actually are. And so they haven't gotten to the point where they realize who they actually are. They're at the point where they're like, I want to define everything and into the thing that suits me most. So when Daniel found access to the house, like when he inherited it, he decided that he wanted to create a little miniature utopia. And he was like, I want us to not be rich. I want us to not have jobs. I want us to just have a property so we don't have to worry about paying to live, and to create an almost like a self-substantiating life where we grow our own food, or, you know, we have just enough means by writing papers and working at the college to be able to feed ourselves and keep the lights on. And other than that, I just want to read and philosophize with my friends. And I see no reason why that isn't a fulfilling life. And it's like, first of all, you got a numbers problem here, because you got 3 boys and 2 girls. One of the boys is gay. 2 of the girls and 2 of the boys may or may not have things with each other. Eventually, someone's going to get pregnant or something like this. Is why utopias don't last, because they're only good for a small community and for a specific time and place. They don't last over time, and they don't last over growth. So communal living and things like that, yeah, it's great. Like, all these people share their own raincoat, but if you add a child to the mix, you have different responsibilities that are going to get in the way of your dreams. And the same goes for romantic relationships and things like that. Like, people do have needs, and they're going to find them, and it's going to disrupt. You didn't think of everything. I think that's what it boils down to with communism and everything else. It's like, you didn't think of everything. You think you thought of everything, because obviously if there was something you didn't think of, it's not in your head to realize you didn't think of it. But you didn't. There's always something else. So anyway, their lives are chugling along. Cassie's kind of like sidestepping landmines here and there. She makes a mistake about onions. Apparently Lexi hated onions, and she eats them and doesn't think about it until everybody kind of freaks out when they call her on it. And then she plays it off. She does a really good job playing it off, but Daniel's been suspicious. So there's a drunk night where, and all this time she's sneaking off on these walks, because she knows that Lexi used to take walks for like an hour every night and just be alone and walk around, and that's where she was supposedly murdered, was on one of these walks. And Cassie's realizing, I'm never alone, and it bothers me to not have my alone time. And I think she thinks maybe Lexi was that way too, like this was her time to escape from the hive and to escape from the group. Because Lexi, apparently, when they tracked down Lexi's parents and stuff in the Carolinas in America, those weren't her parents. She adopted another dead girl's moniker in life. And so they're like, how far does this trail go? Like, what kind of a con artist is this chick? So on these walks, she talks to Frank. Cassie talks to Frank and kind of updates him on stuff and gives him her perspective on things and what she thinks is who's who and who done it, what kind of thing. But she doesn't tell him the diary, and I don't know why she doesn't tell him about the diary, but she chooses not to. She has a feeling that it's a bad idea to tell him. And at one point, Frank and Sam arrest 3 people, and all this time Cassie's trying to figure out who's N. And there's other letters in there like AWX and things like that, and she's like, what do those mean? And this is a diary that goes back longer than the time that Lexi has been. She's been keeping this diary for a very long time, and he's got a lot of dates and stuff, but it's almost like it's coded. And so Cassie's trying to figure it out, and she's like, AWS, maybe that's Abby's initials or something like that. And eventually it clicks with her, oh, this girl's on the run all the time. These are airports. So she tells them, hey, check these areas out, and they're able to kind of start to create a trail of where this woman has been over the last decade or so. And she's trying to figure out who N is, and they arrest 3 men for suspicion of attacking the house and criminal mischief or whatever, and one of them's name starts with N. And Cassie's like, I have an idea. What if I'm in the police station when they get there, and we'll know who's possibly involved based on their reaction to seeing me alive? And this guy whose name starts with N reacts. And Cassie's like, wait, maybe he's the baby daddy. Maybe he's the killer. Maybe something else. Who freaking knows? But there's something there, and I'm going to mess with it. Eventually she figures out who N is, and it's Nathaniel? It's Daniel's brother. and she finds a note that she's walking around aimlessly, kind of just like meandering, and she gets guidance from Lexi's ghost, it seems, to the direction of where she was hiding notes with, I'm gonna call him Nathaniel, Nate, whatever. And it's really another surreal, like the diary kind of. And the note is Nathaniel saying, you know, where are you? I need to talk to you. Are you going to agree to the terms that we discussed, type of thing. So Lexi leaves a note in the box under the grass where he left it, saying, you know, I'll be here at such and such a time. See you then. And then she meets him, and she's trying to figure out, okay, is there a romantic relationship? How did Lexi act? Because she knows at this point Lexi's a chameleon. She matches the energy of the people that she interacts with. So she's trying to figure out, like, and then the first thing out of Nate's mouth is something smart and kind of almost cocky. And she's like, I know exactly how Lexi would react. So she gets all like snarky, posh, and bitchy, because she's like, that's going to make him like her. That's the kind of girl he likes, is dumb girls that pretend to be dumber than they are, and bitchy. So she does that, and she comes to find out that Lexi had signed away, or was planning on signing away, her rights to the house for $200,000. And Nate, Daniel's brother, was trying to acquire the house for all that stuff I was telling you about before. So she's like, maybe it was the pregnancy? What's up? Like, what made her decide that this was the time to get out? What was she feeling trapped by the pregnancy? Like, what's the deal? So she gets she confirms, yes, I'm gonna sign it, I agree, whatever. And she tells Frank about it, who's been listening the whole time, and they bring Nate in to try to question him, but, you know, nothing comes of it. They can't get a word in edgewise with this dork. And let's see, what else happens? I kind of want to just skip ahead to near the final scene, because it's just kind of a lot of meandering. The guy that was throwing rocks at the house, the guy that's name starts with N, that she thought was the person that she was meeting, he finally has a final day where he throws a rock at the house, and they all come outside, and Cassie helps attack him with Daniel and Rake. And when he gets away and he's hiding in the bushes, they kind of draw him out, taunting him, talking bad about peasants and stuff, because they know the association with the house is a bunch of rich pricks. And he comes out and they beat his butt, and he's giving it back as good as he's getting. And so Cassie's like, go and find out which one of those three, she thinks it's N, but she's not sure, which one of those three people you arrested before has a messed up face, and you'll know that's him. So they arrest him, and they get the full story of the house. And he's talking about, first of all, the house was built on sacred historic land, so the locals had a problem with that. And the other problem was, all of the local houses built around this house had a purpose. They were workers that helped preserve the estate, and over time they all lost their job because the owner of the house no longer needed them, and he just became like a hermit that let the town just dissolve into despair around the house. And he was talking about like the responsibility of a homeowner like that, like a person that you can't build a town and abandon it. You can't have a child and abandon it. And then he told the real story about the baby. So his version was that the woman who was in a sexual relationship with the guy that owned the house was accused of being with fairies because she went to the house a lot. And so they accused her child of being a changeling, and he was the one that instigated those rumors. And he finally, like, none of the townspeople were worried and they were angry and stuff, and he was like building this like melting pot of disgust. And eventually he killed her. She didn't hang herself. He killed her. He hung her. And the townspeople knew that happened. And one, you don't play with changelings, so you just damned our town. And two, you're a big fat jerk. So that's kind of where the animosity stemmed from. And the other thing that it stemmed from was later, after he died and passed on his house to the next person, they didn't want to turn it into anything. They just let it sit. The person just lived in there again like it was his own little baby mansion. And there was an option for a hotel to be built, the house to be converted into a hotel, and a heliport and all that other stuff, and the town would have thrived with that. It would have opened up opportunities for jobs, and the people wouldn't be suffering the way they are, and the person just declined the offer, and that infuriated the townspeople even more. So that's where it all comes from. All of that went nowhere. The final night, so Cassie has a drunk night with everybody. They all just decide to just indulge, and they're all dancing and singing. She knows her time to leave is coming. Like, Frank's been pushing her to quit and to come out of the undercover operation, and she's like, I'm not doing it, you can't make me. And she's gonna get in a lot of trouble, and he's like, I'm gonna give you a week or 2 weeks, and if you do anything I don't like, I'm pulling you out, and I'm gonna share this conversation with everyone in our office so that you get fired. Or you do everything right, you get the information you need, and this particular conversation is no longer going to exist. I'll delete it. So this final drunken night, she's just taking in this strong pact that she's developed with these people, and it's heartbreaking, and she's just so in love with them. They're so wholesome and beautiful, and she's sitting on this porch swing type of thing with Daniel, and out of the blue he kind of kisses her, and they make out for a little bit. Sam's gonna love that. And her reaction to it was like, she pulls back, and she kind of like sees a distraction from the house and jumps up and like investigates it, like just two people kind of arguing a little bit. And she looks back, and Daniel's just kind of sitting in shadows. She can't see his face, but he's just silent, like dead, like he's just watching her. No reaction, nothing. And she's like, I don't know what just happened. The next day, everybody's so hungover and miserable that she comes down for breakfast, and then she passes out on the couch downstairs. And then when she wakes up, nobody's there. And she's like, where is everyone? So she gets up to go to her room, and Daniel's in there waiting for her. And he's like, who are you? And she's like, tries to play it off and act like nothing happened. And then for no reason that she can officially think of, she just gets an urge, and she unplugs her microphone. And then what she does is she undoes her blouse and shows him the microphone. And then she goes like shh. And then she goes downstairs and takes it off and puts it next to the speaker and plays music. And then she goes back up to Daniel and is like, we gotta talk. And so she tells him everything. And she's like, what made me? Like, what burned me? And he was like, I knew it from the second I saw you, but I wasn't sure. And I was hoping, and there was little things like the onions thing, but really it was the kiss, because Lexi would have gone for it, and we would have had sex, and then nothing would have come of it, because she doesn't consider the future, and she just doesn't consider. But you pulled back, and you must have a reason for that. Like, you probably have a boyfriend or something on the outside. You didn't do what Lexi would have done, and that's how I knew. And then she's like, I don't know what you want to do with that information, but I'm not leaving, and this investigation's going to continue, and you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with that. And he's like, I bet I'm gonna fuck you up. So everybody comes back, she's got her mic back on, and he's trying to find ways to trip her up. Like, for one thing, her major in college is supposed to be English, and she's not well versed in it. And he's like, hey, can you help me with this research assignment that I'm doing? I wanted to ask you about such and such. really obscure author that she apparently wrote a thesis on. And she's like, I don't feel like it. I don't know. I don't feel like it. And he's like, I helped you with your term, you know? And he's just kind of smiling like, you know, I got you. And she's like, no, I don't know what's going on, but I've been having weird dreams. I haven't been sleeping well. Something's coming up. I'm really angry. And she just throws a real bitch fit. And everybody's so worried about her all the time that everybody immediately turns on Daniel. And they're like, leave her alone. We love her. And she's traumatized. And Frank calls later that night and he's like, what was that? And she's like, I have a plan to, like, you're going to have to trust me, but I have a plan. And essentially her plan is that she's going to pretend to have started to remember what killed her. And that she's going to, like, make it out like she doesn't trust the people in the house, because she's pretty sure at this point that somebody in the house had something to do with it, and that there's an issue there. So she's going to use that as an excuse for bad behavior to get away with Daniel and her being at odds, because he's going to do everything he can to mess her up. Then she's like, Frank, what if you arrest all of us, or you bring us in for questioning or something? Or no, I think Frank says he's going to do that, because Frank's not going to give her the full 2 weeks. He's going to mess her up too. He's like, I promised you something, but that didn't mean I'm not going to do my job. And I'm going to, like, break my promise without breaking it, because I'm a sneaky little fucker. So he leaves a message and he's like, you guys are all going to need to come to the station tomorrow and give us some statements. We got some questions. And so, like, that's the next day, and she's just like, we don't have to go. We're not arrested, right? Like, let's just not go. And Daniel's looking at her like, Later on, Daniel comes to her room alone when nobody's around. And when he comes into her room and turns his back to close the door, and as he does it, she gets this, like, subtle urge, like she's just like, something's up. So she reaches up and yanks the wire out, and then goes back to normal, like he can't see. And he starts talking to her like, look, I understand that you're a cop and our kiss didn't mean anything, but, and he's just doing stuff to, like, get her in trouble and make it so that the people listening will come and get her. And she smiles and shows him the wire, and she's like, you thought you had me, you didn't. I'm smarter than you. So Daniel's super pissed. They go to the station, and she's trying to pretend to continue to be Lexi because she doesn't know who's watching her through the the two-way glass. So she's just like, can't freak out and talk to him and whatever. And then she gets to talk to Frank and Sam, and she's like, I got a plan. Why don't you interview me like I'm Lexi, and I'll tell you that I make it seem like I remember stuff, but I won't tell you. That way I don't have to act like I know something I don't know. And you can show that video to the other guys, except for Daniel, so that they can see that they got to come clean with me. And then you let us all go back to the house, except for Daniel, and let me work them. And I'll get them to tell me what I need them to tell me. And he's like, why not Daniel? And she's like, I don't know, I feel funny. So they do that, and they hold Daniel for further questioning. And I kind of feel bad for Daniel, because this kind of sucks how long they kept him there. So, she gets to the house, and she throws a whole bitch fit, and then she's like, they're like, oh, I know, Cassie, we saw the tape. And she's like, you saw it and you weren't going to tell me, how dare you? And, she's really good. And then they all break down and start crying, and they tell her. And they're like, we found a note in the rain jacket that we all share from your trip to sell your share of the property, and we were angry with you about it. And one thing led to another, and one of us stabbed you, and you left, and it was the worst night of our lives. And Daniel immediately took charge of the situation and was like, I'm going to go out with Justin and try to find her. And so he does, and he finds her dying or dead, and they drag her into the shed so that she doesn't get rained on. They're like preserving the corpse or whatever. Daniel doesn't give a shit, but Justin's like heartbroken, and it's a whole mess. And then Daniel does this really eerie thing. He's like, okay. So he comes back to the house, he takes all their clothes, burns them, cleans up the mess, cleans up the knife, and he's like, so we are going to rewind the clock to 11 o'clock that night, and we're all going to sit down and we're going to play poker as though it were, so we're going to build our alibi from scratch. And then they played cards, and so he kept Lexi there as like a placeholder for Lexi, like, oh, Lexi's doing really, oh, Lexi doubled down, she bet this, and like, it's a really creepy thing that he's doing. And he does this for that night and the next day, where the story they concocted was that Lexi went out when everybody went to sleep for her walk, and when they woke up in the morning, she wasn't back yet, and they couldn't tell that she wasn't back yet. They figured she walked in the morning too. So they have like plausible deniability of everything. And this is the story they gave the cops, and the cops can't break this alibi down, no matter how hard they try. And they did try. They can't figure out what, there's something there's not being told, but whatever. They did too good a job. So they're telling Lexi all of this, and it's feeding into the mic. And she's sure Frank is like roaring down the highway on his way. She's sure that Daniel's roaring down the highway on his way. And when Daniel finally does show up, he's got this old revolver that they had found in the house. It's like an old historic thing that they were cleaning and polishing and just like having fun with. And he's like, you know, fine. I'm going to play this the way I'm going to play it. And so she still doesn't know who did it, who stabbed her. But she can tell, she thinks it was Justin. I think that's who ended up being the person that did it, but I can't remember. Anyway, Daniel decides he's not going to prison. He's going to commit suicide by cop. So he pulls the gun out and points it at Lexi, and Lexi's arguing with him and trying to get him to put the gun down, and everything's going crazy. And in the middle of everything, Sam jumps through the window and shoots Daniel in the chest or something, and as he's dying, everybody's holding him and crying, and Sam gets a hold of Cassie, and it's a big mess. Or no, Cassie had shot Daniel. That's what happened. She shot Daniel, and when she did, like, he had shot at her first, and like, anyway, so she gets taken to the station with everybody else. It's like they just got out, now they're back in the station, and everyone's like, they kind of tell them about her and who she really is, and she can tell when she sees them in passing that they know, and it breaks her heart, and everything's resolved. It's over. But one of the things is she's got to be interviewed by the internal affairs for having shot her weapon. So she's doing her like breakdown of the scene and like, you know, why she's not a criminal for doing this. And in the middle of it, she goes to the bathroom and shoots a text to Sam and Frank, and she's like, hey, somebody needs to go watch that house right now. They need to be at that house immediately. Something's going to happen. And sure enough, the guy that was telling him the story about the dead baby burned the house to the ground. So later that night, she's in her apartment in this really surreal feeling of like, she's got her own clothes on and it feels wrong, and her apartment feels wrong, and everything feels wrong. But one thing that she knows is right is like, when she thought she was going to die, she was worried that if she was going to die, most people think of their mother when they die, or that's like one of the most common words that people say is mom. And she didn't have a mom, she was adopted, so she was like, who's my final person to think about and to call for? And it was Sam. And so when Sam comes to her apartment, he's kind of like not sure about her. He's like, you know, are you gonna leave me for going undercover full time? Like what? And she's like, no, you're my only. And he's like, funny, I've been carrying this ring around. You want to marry me? And she's like, are you marrying me or breaking up with me? Because it's really ambiguous the way he does it. And he's like, nah, I want to marry you, ho. So that happens. She's engaged. Frank comes by the next day and kind of like grills her, and he's like, I know that you were playing games with that music you were playing on the mic. Like, he's like, I know you were playing with me a little bit. Like, I can tell. And she's just like, she plays it as straight as she can and gets through it. And he's like, by the way, here's a tape of some stuff that I know about that you don't, you know, whatever. And then he gives it to her. She doesn't listen to it. She just puts it away. So I think that comes up later in another book, maybe. I don't know. But she later goes to visit Abby, like months later. And Abby's gotten the whole group kind of split up, and Abby's gotten herself situated in a little studio apartment. And she's really not cool with seeing Cassie again. But Cassie's like, I brought all these photos and documents from the case, and I felt like you guys should have them, and I know you don't like me, I know you don't want to see me, but I feel like you deserve to have these. And Abby's like, I don't even want them. And then she's like, you know the strangest thing? Like, after they kind of break through the hatred part of the conversation, she's like, the strangest thing is, I called Rake, and I called Justin and them, and Rake's drinking really heavy, and he's working for his father, and his father's like accountant firm or whatever. And she's like, I mentioned that I miss Lexi, and he asked me who? Like, he forgot her. And then he kind of went back to kind of joking and talking, and she was like, I worry that that house was the keeper of our memories for each other, and that with it being gone, we're going to forget each other. And so Cassie, like, she didn't want the papers and the pictures, and she was like, I don't want any of that. And Cassie's like, here. She takes one picture out of all 5 of them together on a snowy day, huddled up, being close. She's like, just take this at least. And Abby's like, cool, I freaking hate you, get out of my house. Then Cassie's at her desk, and somebody says that the father of Lexi wants to talk to her. And he calls her, and he's like, he tells her the whole story of Lexi and who she really is. Her name was something else, obviously, but I don't remember, like Rose or something. And he was like, when she was 9, you know, she wanted to marry somebody that worked for our farm. Like, we had a farm in Australia, and her entire ambition in life was to marry one of the workers that helped to work our farm, so that she can help run our farm and take care of us in our old age. That was her entire life goal. And at 9 years old, her mother died giving birth, and she never recovered. There was something that broke for her from that, and she started running away a lot. And it wasn't until she was 18 that she finally did it for good, or 16. And she would send him every year a birthday card from a different place in the world. She went to New Zealand, she went to America, she went all over. Now she's in Ireland. And then Cassie tells him a little bit of what she knows and gives him whatever soothing words that she can give him, and he tells her, you know, it's so sad. I almost cried. It almost got me. And then it doesn't, at one point she called Rob, heard his voice, and hung up, but she called him from a private number, and it was like right before the end of her undercover thing. So it doesn't acknowledge Rob's phone call to her, because in his story he had called her and like tried to apologize, and then that's when he found out she was marrying Sam, and it's a whole thing. So it doesn't do that, but it does talk a lot about her perspective of the Rob thing. And this book is really easy to read without reading any of the other books. Like, each book is its own standalone novel. It gives you enough detail about the previous experiences to keep you in the loop, but you don't really need to read anything else. But it's so powerful if you've read it. I love it. It's almost like being haunted by the property you live in, and I can speak on that. Like, the house that I'm selling right now, my last words to that house, it was kind of one of those silly things. I had finished putting everything away, and, you know, the house was empty, and I took a doorknob. That was what I kept for my soul of the house kind of thing. At this point, I had just the couch in the house and nothing else. Like, I didn't even have a shower curtain. Like, everything was bare bones. There was nothing in the kitchen. I'd given away the fridge. And I was finally done. I was ready to leave. The next day, my family was coming to help take the rest of my stuff down to Alabama. And I did one final walk through the house, and I was just like, why were you so mean to me? Like, I just felt like the house hated me. Like, I don't know, I never felt at home there. And I've had people come to my house, like, and visit, and I've had multiple people, like about 3 different people, tell me they felt a darkness there, like they didn't like it. I don't believe in all of that. But I get what she was describing with this house, how it made this, like, almost like surreal, like the opposite of what I'm describing. And I almost, it really is an interesting, like, 2 changelings meet and pass ways kind of thing. Because she and Lexi never felt like they had a home, and I can identify with that very strongly. I never had a people group. I was always an outsider. Like, I was always the only white person in the group, or I'm always the only female in the group, to the point where when I'm around white people or around women, I don't fit in. I don't feel like I belong there either. But I definitely don't belong around, just black people or Mexican people, because they always see me as an outsider. No matter how much Spanish I speak, or no matter how much about black culture I know or identify with, I'm never going to be one of them. I'm never going to share the same experiences they have. And that's fine. But it really is a sad place to be. I'm fine with it now. Like, I don't care about acceptance anymore, but it really troubled me growing up. And so, like, I feel like Lexi and Cassie have that. They never felt like they really belonged. And, like, for Cassie to have that with Rob, and for him to do what he did, would have been so tragic. And then with Lexi to have this people group and to finally feel accepted or whatever, but also for it to all be a con. I don't know, it's a wild ride. But, Cassie decides, like, she and Sam were trying to talk about, like, well, we can't both work the murder squad and be married, and clearly she needs to be back on the murder squad. And she's like, we'll deal with that when it comes. We'll either do something amazing in our career that'll warrant us special permission, or we will just have to, you'll be a murder squad detective and I'll be bitching at you all the time until I get to be a murder squad detective. Or you will have your own department to manage somewhere else. You'll get promoted, and then I can do what I want to do. She's like, it doesn't really matter because we're so compatible. We'll find a way through anything. And this is nothing. I thought it was really beautiful. I thought they fought a lot about stuff that didn't really matter, but anyway. Okay, that's it. I got stuff to do and people to see. But yeah, Tana French, The Likeness. It's quite a read. The next one is called, I want to say the Safe Place or something. And it's told from the perspective of Frank Mackey, I want to say his name is, and his daughter Holly. And there's a haunting kind of thing there too. So it's really good. But I don't know. I was trying to read, I had to stop it. I was reading The Nicest Couple. Ugh. What a badly written book. I'm not going to be reviewing that one. I might be reviewing it just up to the point that I got, just to throw a fit. But anyway, all right, y'all. It's been almost an hour. I'm out.